Let's talk about those Mets who are making more moves, or at least they did over the weekend. Their estimated payroll as of now, $349 million with taxes. The Steve Cohen tax, remember they created that so-called threshold for Steve Cohen, brings him to $420 million after taxes. And I don't know if they're done yet. It wouldn't surprise me if the Mets make more moves. It's just crazy what they're doing right now. But let's talk about those moves. Kodai Senga, the Japanese ace coming over to the States. They signed for 5 years, $75 million, 29 years old, spent 11 seasons in Japan, 2.42 ERA, 1.09 whip, 10K per nine, 3.4 walks per nine. So potentially some issues here with control and command. The Arsenal mid-90s fastball. He has a forkball that's referred to as a ghost forkball. Never heard of that before, but it sounds interesting. Average slider and curve based on what I read. Scott, how you feeling about Kodai Senga? Where does he slot into your starting pitcher rankings?
Well, first of all, the Mets are spending that kind of money and didn't see fit to bring back Jacob deGrom. So I don't know what to make of that. Like they're spending more money than God has made, and yet weren't willing to pay what they needed to bring deGrom back. So that's interesting. But they have obviously added pieces to the rotation: Verlander, Jose Quintana, and now Senga. Senga is pretty interesting. He throws harder than most pitchers who come out of Japan. He peaked at 101 this past year. That's the hardest he's ever thrown. But he sits in the mid to high 90s. He does have that ghost fork that rated as a better splitter than Shohei Ohtani had when the two of them were still in the same league. And obviously we've seen how nasty Ohtani's splitter is. So if Senga's is better, that's noteworthy, I would say. Now, because he does throw so hard and he's of rather small, he's of a smaller build, 6 feet. I think right around 180 pounds. Understandably, he's had some trouble staying on the mound over the years. It's not a lot of serious, major injuries, but a lot of little stuff that keeps him from taking on that's prevented him from taking on a big workload year after year. So you do worry about durability with him. He has had control problems in Japan, so you worry about that. As with any pitcher making that very big leap, you worry about whether their game's going to play the same way. The ball is a different size over here. It has a different feel, a different texture. Is his stuff going to play the same way? Are his grips going to work the same way? I think, there's always that degree of mystery with a player making that transition. But Kodai Senga was a big pitcher in Japan. And so a certain amount of enthusiasm is warranted. I rank him about right around the 45, right around the top 45 at starting pitcher. So I have him just behind up and comers like Jesus Luzardo, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo. But for now, I have him just ahead of reclamation projects like Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, and Freddie Peralta. So that's the range we're talking about. Pitchers with a lot of upside, but also question marks. And Senga, I feel like is, fits that moniker himself.
Would you rather have Senga with the Mets or Chris Bassett with the Blue Jays?
Senga, I think there's more upside there, though Bassett's not far behind.
Okay. Yeah, last point on Kodai Senga, you mentioned he's kind of missed some time here or there. Hasn't thrown more than 148 innings since 2019. The way that it's constituted right now, the Mets rotation looks like Tyler McGill and David Peterson are on the outside looking in. Two players who we do think still have some upside here, but perhaps there might be some times where they have to go to a 6-man rotation, or if someone has to miss time, those guys can fill in. But as of now, it doesn't look too great for their
That's another thing with Senga is he's used to starting every 6th game, like once a week, basically. I think they start the same day of the week in Japan, each pitcher. But now he's going to be in a 5-man rotation, at least most of the time, you would assume.
I'm telling you right now, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander are not going to be okay with a 6-man rotation because those guys are just fierce competitors. They're going to want to pitch all the time. So I don't really see a 6-man rotation happening with the Mets, but I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Last couple of moves here. Brendan Nimmo back to the Mets on an 8-year, $162 million deal. I don't want to crush the Mets. Like, obviously, they're spending money, which is very good for their fans, and it's great for the sport. It's great for the players. I'm happy they're getting paid. 8 years for Brandon Nimmo, someone who has played more than 100 games twice in his career, just absolutely blew me away. Did not understand that. 20 mil per year, that's fine. AAV for a player like him, solid OBP, okay defender. They needed a center fielder, no doubt about it. And he was pretty valuable for fantasy last year because the outfield position was pretty bad. But Scott, I don't really understand the length of this contract. What do you think about Brandon Nimmo? His early ADP is 182, according to the NFBC.
We've been seeing it everywhere this offseason. Like the contracts are blowing away sort of the predicted contracts coming into the offseason, especially in terms of length. I mean, you're talking about Xander Bogaerts signing an 11-year deal as a 30-year-old shortstop. Right. And this Brandon Nimmo deal fits right along with that. Last year was actually the first year he got true everyday at bats. And now he's earning this kind of money. Combined 19 home runs and stolen bases combined. So yeah, he was he did have a 5.1 WAR according to Baseball Reference. So again, you'd like to see that he had put together a few years of doing that before you commit this kind of money to him. But I think it is fair to say Nimmo a better real life player than fantasy player. So that's part of the reason this is blowing our minds. Combined 19 home runs and stolen bases, that obviously limits Nimmo's appeal in 5x5 leagues, especially roto leagues, especially. He was, however, the 9th best outfielder in points leagues because of those on base skills, because also there weren't that many good outfielders. Right. I don't think, the point per game average for Nimmo wasn't that impressive. No, not what you'd expect from the 9th best outfielder.
2.7 fantasy points per game. That was tied for 33rd among outfielders last year.
And so even in that format, I rank him only about 30th among outfielders, a little lower in categories leagues, obviously. So, just kind of a mid-tier outfielder for fantasy, even if he's being paid like more. And, hopefully, I would assume with this contract, there's not much threat of him going back to being a part-time player.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with all of that. I think he's a better real-life player, Brendan Nimmo, than a fantasy player. He's much better in OBP leagues as well. 4th, 5th outfielder, something like that in those 5 outfielder leagues. In a 3 outfield league, I don't know that you're going to need Brendan Nimmo. There's not really much upside there. But a name that you might need to pick up off waivers, whatever it might be. But Brendan Nimmo back to the Mets on an 8-year deal. Last one I'll quickly mention, David Robertson did sign with the Mets on a 1-year, $10 million deal. Will be the setup man for Edwin Diaz. And with Robertson not going back to the Phillies, looks like Sir Anthony Dominguez is the closer for now. It's his job to lose. I guess there's still a chance they can either sign or trade for someone in the offseason. But as of now, December 12th, Sir Anthony Dominguez, the front runner for the Phillies closer job